If you like what you're hearing, put your money where your media is by supporting ad-free independent podcasts like this one. Go to lauraflanders.com/membership, and thank you. Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, and this is The Laura Flanders Show, the TV and radio program that seeks to raise radical spirits by interviewing forward-thinking people with real models of shifting power from the worlds of arts, entrepreneurship, politics, and activism. Art, AIDS, and Retrospection, two powerhouse artists from the 1980s, David Wojnarowicz and Peter Hujar, are receiving their first major retrospectives more than 2 decades after their deaths. It's cause for celebration, but also self-reflection, say our guests, curators David Keel from the Whitney Museum and Joel Smith from the Morgan Library and Museum. They're joined by artist and educator Pamela Sneed in a discussion of the ongoing difficult work of inclusion. That, plus a performance from Sneed right here in our studio, it's all coming up on The Laura Flanders Show, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Welcome. The New York Times Style magazine recently dedicated an entire issue to the 1980s, what the editors called a time on fire. From Perry Ellis to hip-hop, the period gave us a lot. But what is getting especially close attention now is the art that arose out of the AIDS epidemic, a disease that the president's communications director of the time called nature's revenge on gay men. That was Patrick Cannon. By the time President Reagan actually said the word AIDS, the disease had spread to 113 countries, killed over 20,000 Americans, and infected twice that number. Is it just time passing that is bringing this period back into vision, or is it its resonance in another time that feels kind of aflame? This year, the art world is seeing 2 major retrospectives of artists of that period. At the Morgan Library, Peter Hujar, Speed of Life. At the Whitney Museum, David Wojnarowicz, History Keeps Me Awake at Night. The 2 artists' lives intertwined, absolutely personal, adamantly political, formal, furious, playful, profane. You'll find singularity and solidarity and all of the above in these shows. What do they have to do with now, though, with the art and activism of today? We're going to delve into that question and a whole lot more, I'm sure, with my guests today. David Keel is Curator Emeritus at the Whitney. Joel Smith is the Richard Menschel Curator of the Morgan Library and Museum. We're also joined by artist, author, and educator Pamela Sneed. She's a member of the board of Visual AIDS, and last summer she was part of doing a program celebrating the great poet and essayist whom the Times forgot, Audre Lorde, with David Wojnarowicz. Let's start there. Pamela, welcome to this. Welcome all.
Thank you, and I'm also a performer.
You certainly are, and we'll see some more about that later. What does this work mean to you? Let's start with the work that we're going to be talking about today.
Well, one of the things that I focused on for the program last year with Visual AIDS was the idea that both Audre Lorde and David Wojnarowicz were sort of transformed by illness, right? And so that was the catalyst to make them sort of these political spokespersons of their time, right? And so I was interested in that. So, you know, she had cancer and she wrote The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. And then David also spoke about silence, and he has that image, you know, with his mouth sewn shut. And so they were 2 really great visionaries, and I feel like the catalyst was illness. So that's where I sort of like began. And I'm in conversation with like Greg Bordowitz, and I feel like Audre Lorde and David having a conversation in this era. But I talk a lot to students about both of them. I feel like they need in this era the sense of the politics that came before, the urgency, how to overcome silence. Again, we're living in a very tumultuous time. We have a toxic leader, a toxic party. And so how do we fight, and how do we know what came before? And then also for David, one, that he gave voice to talking about like child abuse, but they were also so interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
When I look at Hujar's bio and I look at David's bio, it's like they were poets, they were musicians, they had everything going on. And I think it's really important that we can look at the interdisciplinary nature.
Both artists, David in particular, who perceived commercial success, as artistic failure. They were very skeptical of sort of being accepted by the art world. I mean, David had a show in the mid-'80s which he was very worried about, very concerned that it would somehow ruin his creativity.
He sort of stopped painting for a while. He didn't like the sort of the feeding frenzy of the art world. I think about the time that Peter was sick, and he went back to painting. And I think it's also maybe the changes that happened in his painting come because of this sort of profound relationship that the two artists had.
Well, that was the next thing I was going to ask you about, was about their relationship and how their lives intertwined. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, Hujar is somebody who has a childhood that he can certainly draw in parallel with Wojnarowicz's. He's
about 20 years older, though, right?
Exactly right. And he was able to look at him and say, here's somebody who I have the chance in some way, this is entirely my projection, to make good on the things that I knew I needed when I was young, but that I never had. And his advice to Wojnarowicz from the beginning is spend time not thinking about whether you're selling work. Spend time on your work, and that's indicative of the kind of connection that he sees to him.
I was going to say that the real vocal part of the activism against AIDS comes around the time Peter is diagnosed. Mm-hmm. He had also had close friends who had been dying, and he talks about that. But the same point, there's the writing side of him and the art side of him, and the art side has a lot going on also with something he was very interested in, is the destruction by civilization of the natural world, of natural culture, indigenous culture, how we are destroying our world, this world of machines, and how it's gobbling us up. And that sort of runs through a lot of, I think, his classic paintings. There's so many sides of David, and I think he was almost like a volcano ready to erupt. And that's why I love that image of David in flames.
To go back, though, to this question of the economics and the demographics and the violence of the period, you can't help but be struck by the fact that the beautiful New Whitney is on property right there that in this period was a stroll for transvestites and hookers, was on the way to the piers where a lot of this work had its roots on the art pier that I once visited early in the morning, not late at night. And you could see this incredible work on the walls. But an underculture, a subculture, do we still have that? I mean, what's happened to that?
Color. Yeah. Looking at both of their works, Hujar and Wojnarowicz, I mean, I think it's so, like, pioneering, and I feel like it's so important to, like, sort of, like, document their works. And then on the other hand, I always feel like with, like, you know, the invisibility of one, then there's some way that some other group becomes invisible. How do those worlds come together? How do people of color, how are they seen? How do we get seen of that period?
I mean, Cheryl Sutton is one of the few people of color in these shows, the dancer. Mm-hmm. So it's what's in it, but it's also what's left out.
Certainly. I think the basis for Hujar really doesn't come from a political analysis of any kind. He would be the first to say that the work is about outrage, but it's an outrage that's a personal response to the world. For that matter, his relationship to AIDS is that of somebody who's been thinking about mortality as a part of his art from the very beginning. You know, one of his first important bodies of work is photographs of corpses in the catacombs of Palermo, which he photographs in 1963. Yeah. That comes out of a Catholic background as much as anything else, and out of a sense of connection with Paul Tech, the artist with whom he was visiting the catacombs that day. And so I think there's a lot in Hujar, who's living in the village from the early 1950s onward, before he's even done with high school, that has to do with the sources of his personal sense of disempowerment and rage that simply dovetail with a lot of the political instincts that Wojnarowicz has, and make perfect sense, but a different kind of sense. And when the two of them come together, it adds up to something bigger.
Well, this is part of the project of the exhibitions, it seems to me, is to revive this conversation. Is that right?
David, I think for a long time, was known as the writer, as the artist. So much of the work has stayed with the people who owned it because they loved the work. And I think if there's one work, it's One Day This Boy or One Day This Kid, is the one work that sort of got out there. The Buffaloes Falling was the other one because of the U2 record album cover. People knew the writing, but they didn't know this other side of him. And now it's to show this complexity of his brain, and it's self-taught brain, pretty much.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. My guest, David Keel, is Curator Emeritus at the Whitney Museum and co-curator of an upcoming retrospective of the work of David Wojnarowicz, a painter, photographer, writer, filmmaker, and performance artist who was prominent in the New York City art world of the 1980s. He's joined by Joel Smith, the curator of photography at the Morgan Library and Museum, who is curator of a comprehensive show of the work of Peter Hujar, a mentor and once upon a time lover of Wojnarowicz. Smith's Speed of Life exhibit has been at the Morgan, receiving rave reviews all spring. Keel's Wojnarowicz show, titled History Keeps Me Awake at Night, opens this July at the Whitney in New York. We brought these two shows together and added to our mix the artist, performer, poet, and educator Pamela Sneed. Sneed's a member of the Board of Visual AIDS, the first arts organization fully committed to raising AIDS awareness and creating dialogue around HIV issues today. The work of artists Peter Hujar and David Wojnarowicz is perfectly personal and political and timely, as you'll hear. More to come.
So here we are, my dear friends, gathered together again to celebrate bittersweet life. So here's to our struggles and strife. Let's make the most of these hours till time defeats all with its powers. And let's make the most till the dawn. Keep on going until we are gone. Keep on going until we're gone. So come on, come on. Come on, come on. Keep on going until we're gone. So come on, come on. Come on, come on.
That was Come On by Scott Hardkiss, featuring Lisa Shaw from his album Technicolor Dreaming, released on God Within Recordings. There's an art to produce in this show every week, but the main ingredient we couldn't do without is you. If you appreciate what we do here and value the information and ideas you hear on this podcast, or maybe you want to hear my commentaries about what's going on in the world, I call them the F word, first every week, go to patreon.com/The LF Show. That's patreon.com/The LF Show, and become a sustaining member. If everyone listening to this podcast committed just $2 a month, that's just $24 a year, we'd be able to keep this podcast ad-free. You can also make a one-time donation and see the TV version of this program at www.lauraflanders.org. And please take the time to write a review in Apple Podcasts and suggest people and issues you'd like us to cover on the show. Taking us back to the 1980s, the Peter Hujar exhibition at the Morgan Library and Museum stirs many emotions, and the upcoming David Wojnarowicz exhibition will surely do the same. Both artists found themselves pushed to extremes in the face of the AIDS crisis and ultimately faced their own mortality, succumbing to the virus. My guests are David Keel, Curator Emeritus at the Whitney Museum, and Joel Smith, Curator of Photography at the Morgan. Along with those two comes Pamela Sneed, artist, educator, and a member of the Board of Visual AIDS, which had its beginnings in those years. Sneed reflects on the divisions across and among movements in our times and why unity is so important. It's interesting, though, because the shows, I've heard so many people's different reactions to going to see the shows. A mutual friend of ours, Amy Shoulder, who was one of David's first publishers, said she walked into the Peter Hujar show and just cried. I found it very moving to read the essays, to look at the catalogs. not only because of the beauty of the work, and we haven't even talked about the formalism and the genius of the work itself, but because of that atmosphere of that period of desperate determination not to die in silence, not to be divided from humanity. That speaks to a desire that wasn't just a gay male desire, wasn't just a 1980s desire, certainly wasn't a white people desire alone. It's that I feel these shows reignite, or at least stir.
The voice, the say it, do it, shout it out.
The urgency, the aflame, the don't let us be divided feeling. But at the same time, you're right, there are divisions that are being revealed too. How would you talk to your students about? I mean, what do you encourage your students and the people that are coming to these shows to do to get involved in, or do you just try to choreograph any of that?
Oh well, I've sent everyone to the Hujar show, and I'm going to send everybody to the Wojnarowicz show, and actually I was sitting in a studio with a student the other day, and we were talking about Wojnarowicz, and I think I'm probably one of the only professors who's spoken to them at length about the AIDS era, and because David was a visual artist and also a poet, and I was talking to them about the interdisciplinary nature, and then somebody who had political concerns. And I think that was a really important example for the students. I don't know. I really want to see some bridges being built, in terms of I talk about women. I talk about, being of that era. I talk about Audre Lorde. I talk about On the Board of Visual Aids, and I also do a lot of talks now about that period. And I'm always talking about my peers, because one of the other things that happened is that activism is completely attributed to ACT UP. And it was I was friends with all of these women, like Audre Lorde, like Cheryl Clark, like Sapphire, like all of these people, all these poets, and Essex and Donald. And basically we couldn't get arrested. And so the bottom line is we made art. In that regard, people just attribute this activism to, again, white people. But it was across the board. One of the things that I'm very strong about is not wanting these histories to be segregated. I don't want it to be segregated around color. I don't want it to be segregated around gender. I want to find a way that we can, be inclusive. Yeah.
Adam Weinberg, in the very first essay in the catalog for the Wojnarowicz show, talks about the ambivalent position of the gallery itself in relation to the social movements of its time, and the awkwardness or delicacy of that. Can you elaborate?
Well, the galleries in the East Village, some of these shows they could be one day. It was basically a series of pop-up shows. They could be in a disco, they could be in a coffee shop, but there would be these sort of 1 day, 2 day events, and there would be the theme of the moment. And I think there was a lot of art being made, but it whittles, when you start looking at people like Peter and like David, I would say also like Martin Wong, Nan Golden. These are the people that really delve below that initial. Yes, they're part of this party scene, but at the same point, they're not the scene. They're almost subversive because their work, the more you look at it, the more it eats into you, and it eats into your soul and into how you think. And I think that's something that David's writing almost goes down to what is the essence of being a human and caring, and the anger that we as humans of matter, male, female, color, white, black, green, purple, whatever, that it is there's something very much a human quality that has to come out.
You talked about Eat Away. I've got to ask you about how Peter ended his life. He didn't make a lot of money off this work. And the work is now worth a lot of money. Mm-hmm. How do you make sense of that? And what do we need to learn about how artists can benefit from the work that they're creating? Collectors.
Hujar's got an ambivalent relationship, as you mentioned, to commercial success, and comment that he made to a friend who was consistently employed was jobs are unimportant, meaning you should be able to live as poor as you need to in order to do the work that you care about, to do the art that really matters. And I think an important dimension of what goes on in explaining the dynamic between these artists and explaining the East Village scene in the 1980s is it's the last time in Manhattan that there's a culture and a community of this scale in the shadow of money. It's not in the boondocks, it's not across the river, it's not something separate from Wall Street, it's a short ride. And I think it's simultaneously the awareness on the part of the artists in the community that they're an enemy camp of some kind, not in a strictly political sense, but in a sense that it's a culture that's about something distinct, which is no longer possible in Manhattan. It's just something which has been literally priced out. And I think it's also, as much as we mourn the loss of the various artists, the loss of the audience in the AIDS crisis is, I think, the sort of unspoken swell there that you have to recognize. There's never again been an American audience of that sophistication and attunement and connection here at the center of museum activity and of performance and everything else that goes on in Manhattan. And that quality of being sort of this outside camp that is not outside but is right in the midst of the city is a thing that it's very hard to talk about regaining.
It was certainly a shock for a lot of white men.
When you look at the sort of the generation, say, in the 80s and early 90s, the amount of people in the art schools and dance schools and the whole thing, how they talked about losing a whole generation of mentors, people who weren't there anymore, who were just, when they died of AIDS, or right at that point where they were having something to say and to do, and they weren't there. Yeah. And it wasn't being able to pass this on. And I think that's why what survives the writing or the photographs or the paintings or whatever it is, that survives is the way that I think a new generation now is coming back and saying, wait, this is what I've been looking for.
I hear so much resonance with the Black Lives Matter movement, the surfacing of loss, the surfacing of grief. There are many communities that have experienced that level of grief and slaughter and being ignored. I hope that from this moment we can figure out how to distill something that pulls these experiences together with full force. You're going to take us out, Pamela. You might have a final comment, but you're also going to perform. And I thank you for that. Do you want to set up what you're going to perform?
Well, one, it's interesting because I just wrote this book, Sweet Dreams, and it's a memoir piece, and it's part of a larger memoir. And funny enough, a lot of it is about like child abuse. It's personal, it's political. And interestingly enough, I feel like there's something about if you're a woman of color, people are like, suck it up, like, of course, But I was actually, for the show, I was looking again at like Wojnarowicz, and I was looking again at Hujar, and I felt this incredible permission that both of them were so bold, and certainly David, in talking about very difficult subjects and speaking from an interdisciplinary place. And so I felt like, thank God, again, I can look to him and say, you know what? Okay, there are people who are doing this, who are outspoken, and that we can, speak the unspeakable. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I wanted to also say, I wrote something for Avram Finkelstein's new book, and I think a history of AIDS through its images. And basically one of the things that I think is happening in this period too is that it's kind of like after the Holocaust, there was a whole period where artists could not write Like writers couldn't write. People just couldn't speak. It was just huge. And I feel like what's happening in this period is that we're kind of defrosting.
Yeah.
I mean, that there's like...
You're getting permission.
Right, but there's PTSD, and then we're here, and then finally, decades later, we can like start to finally articulate what happened. We were so bombarded.
Yeah. Thank you all for your work. We could keep talking, obviously, for hours. The Peter Hujar show closes in New York on May 20th at the Morgan, but goes to Berkeley, and that opens in July. At the Whitney, the Wojnarowicz show opens on the 13th of July.
Formally to the public.
And closes at the end of September, so don't delay endlessly to getting there. It will travel after that to Madrid, and we hope other parts as well. Thank you all for being with us. Pamela, over to you.
Rope-a-dope for Sandra Blonde. I had just begun to relax, celebrate the marriage equality ruling. I had just begun feeling with Obama. I was watching Ali, in trouble, off the ropes, delivering to his opponent the rope-a-dope my father's eyes, excitement. I was just beginning to breathe air, feel exhilarated at images of Joe Biden and President Obama running down halls of the White House with rainbow flags, like boys with kites soaring. I was just beginning to forgive deaths of my brothers to AIDS, not forget. There should still be tribunals for them and every woman abused by the medical system. I had just begun to turn a corner on Mike Brown, Freddie Gray, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, the massacre at AME, not think of it all, every day. And then the police killed this young black girl in custody in Texas, claimed she committed suicide. I remember we're a war nation. In war times, I imagine how James Bayard, Nina Fouts, seeing a nation turn its dogs, teeth, gas, hoses, bullets on children and adults. I can't stop thinking about Steve Biko, his battered face. They say he hung himself too. The world's outrage. Who will pray now for us? America. An excerpt of David Wojnarowicz, One Day This Kid. One day, families will give false information to their children, and each child will pass down that information generationally to their families, and that information will be designed to make existence intolerable for this kid. One day, this kid will begin to experience all this activity in his environment, and that activity and information will compel him to commit suicide or to submit to danger in hopes of being murdered or submit to silence and invisibility. He will be subject to loss of home, civil rights, jobs, and all conceivable freedoms. All this will begin to happen in 1 or 2 years when he discovers he desires to place his naked body on the naked body of another boy.
That was artist, author, and educator Pam Sneed. For more information and links to all my guests, you can go to lauraflanders.org. And while you're there, please download and subscribe to this podcast, and be sure to write a review. It helps us spread the word. Don't forget, you can make a one-time donation at lauraflanders.org and see the TV version of this show. You can also sign up to become a sustaining member and receive all sorts of free, exclusive, extra content, including my weekly commentaries, first at patreon.org. That's patreon.com/the LF Show. That's at patreon.com. That's patreon.com/the LF Show. My commentary this week's on whether Ida B. Wells could have relied on Facebook. And if we had depended on Facebook then, would we ever have had a national lynching memorial? Become an active listener. Sign up and participate. We can't make this program without you, and we like making it dependent on just you. Thanks. This show is produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, with Tammy Hamada Warrenoff, Monica Mohapatra, Danica D'Souza, Diego Romero Montiel, Jeannie Hopper, and Mira Al-Rahim. The program's made possible by the Novo Foundation and listeners like you. Become a member today. Thanks for your ongoing support. We couldn't do it without you. Stay kind, stay curious. Till the next time, I'm Laura Flanders.